We have about 100 ways to say it, some more polite, some a bit rude. Put on your big boy pants. Deal with it. And my favorite, suck it up, Buttercup. In today's reading from the letter to the Hebrews, the writer says exactly this to his congregation. He says it a little nicer and more poetically, but the message is the same, even if it's not stated in a modern American idiom. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, February 2nd, 2024. A congregation of people weary of keeping the faith. A preacher pulling out all the stops to encourage them to hang on. Words to cajole, words to encourage, examples to follow. It's all there. And yesterday we read perhaps his most inspiring plea of all, where he says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who, for the sake of the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God." Now he picks up this thread and extends it. Having lifted up heroes of the faith from the Old Testament who persevered in the faith, even when they knew they would not live long enough to see their ultimate hopes realized, he now lifts up Jesus Christ. "Consider him who endured such hostility against himself from sinners," he writes, "so that you may not grow weary or lose heart." His point is that Christ endured untold suffering and shed his blood for the forgiveness of our sins. If Christ could endure, so can you, he implies. Next, he makes one of those moves that makes me nervous, makes me worry a little bit. One of the enduring pastoral questions I get is about the question of whether God punishes us, and if so, how? Are we being punished for past sins, for example, if we fall victim to violent crime? The answer, by the way, is no. If God punishes, it's not by making us victims of crime. In this next passage, the writer of Hebrews, though, indicates that God does indeed discipline. "Endure trials for the sake of discipline," he writes. "God is treating you as children. For what child is there whom a parent does not discipline?" But he is maddeningly nonspecific about what form this discipline takes. He seems to imply that the persecution they're currently enduring is a kind of discipline on God's part. And if it is discipline, then it is to be considered something for their own upbuilding in the faith. Frankly, and I don't say this lightly, I'm a bit skeptical about this. We all alike, as human beings, suffer trials and tragedy. How are we to know if and which is God's hand at work dispensing discipline, and which is just part of the natural course of human affairs? Without some direct revelation from God, it seems to me that it's impossible to discern the one from the other. And then we end up angry with God for some of the tragic events in our lives. That's just not helpful from a pastoral perspective. But putting that aside, he concludes this brief passage by saying, "Now discipline always seems painful rather than pleasant at the time, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." Fair enough. Whatever else we may want to say about how God disciplines, his point is clear. Their present circumstances are just plain difficult, and it would be easy to throw in the towel. Not so fast, he says. Buck up. Put on your big boy pants. Suck it up, Buttercup. Okay, it's not exactly how the original Greek reads. Here's what he actually says. "Therefore lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed." What a vivid picture. Drooping hands, weak knees. We can all relate to that. Make straight paths for your feet. Well, that's a little more obscure, but no less vivid an image. For we all know what it's like to trudge along weary and dejected. And if we could turn around and trace our paths when we walk like that, we would often find that instead of walking a straight beeline path, our steps have meandered a little from side to side. Now is not the time, he says, to grow weary. Now is the time to lean in, as the current saying goes, and redouble convictions. Buck up, lean in, suck it up. Life is hard, and sometimes Christian discipleship is even harder, but that is no reason to give up. Instead, it is a reason to put one's shoulder to the plow. Is it worth it? For the writer of the letter to the Hebrews, it's an unequivocal yes. Tomorrow, how should we live as Christians in a hostile world? Hint, it's not about picking fights. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.